So I've been making monsters for 5e for a long while, both for my own games and also professionally, as we've been publishing resources for 5e, adventures and stuff like that. And I've always thought that I was pretty good at making monsters. I can make a dynamic monster, something that will challenge the character, something that has multiple actions and keeps a dynamic flow in the combat. But I've recently learned, or kind of recently learned, that there is one thing that most of my monsters, maybe 99% of my monsters, have been missing, and something that's also missing from 99% of the monsters in the monster manual. And this is one thing that will really make your monster feel special, make it feel epic, make it feel a lot more tactically challenging, and also really reward the players and make combat more entertaining for them. So if you haven't guessed it by now, the thing that I'm talking about, the one thing I think nearly every 5e monster should have, is a weakness. Now, when I say weakness, you may think, okay, we can give it vulnerability to radiant damage, and there's plenty of monsters in the monster manual that have vulnerabilities, although not enough, I'd say. The weaknesses that I think monsters should have are weaknesses that the characters can exploit, sure, but also weaknesses that changes the flow of the combat. If you just find out that if I deal this kind of damage, then it hurts more, then that doesn't really change anything except make the monster go down faster. We want weaknesses that the characters can figure out and then exploit, something that will require the player characters to change their tactics, employ new and innovative tactics, and find out exactly how they can exploit this weakness to their benefit. Take, for example, the classic wolf. This is a fairly boring creature that the characters may meet early on in their adventuring career. It's not that dangerous. It has some features that make it a bit dynamic. It has pack tactics, which it can use to sort of take advantage of being multiple wolves surrounding a single target, which of course is very like what we've seen wolves do, at least in popular culture. I haven't met many wolves personally, so I wouldn't say for sure if that's how it works. But it is at least a trope and it fits well, and that is a good advantage for the beast to have. So what could be a weakness for the wolf? Well, you could go with the classic wolves are afraid of fire. So if the characters use a torch, it'll be frightened of that character. That's a pretty fine weakness. The player characters don't usually go around wielding torches in the middle of combat, but if the characters do have a torch with them, you can let them know, okay, the wolf seems scared of the barbarian who's wielding the torch, and they'll figure out, okay, torches make these wolves scared, and that makes them fight a lot less effectively. Another thing you could do is also reverse the pack tactics advantage that the wolves have and instead give them pack dependence. So if they're, let's say, 20 or 30 feet away from any other wolf, they have disadvantages on ability checks, attack rolls, saving throws, everything. It's basically that they're frightened as well, but we don't give it that fear condition because they would have to be afraid of something. They're not really afraid of something, they're just afraid because they are alone. So not only do they fight more effectively when they're in a pack, they fight less effectively and not less effectively if you manage to separate them. And that's exactly what we want. We want weaknesses the characters can figure out during the combat, and also weaknesses they can exploit, so they can try to separate the wolves from one another, or they can pull forth a torch to scare off the wolves. These sort of small tactic changes to how the characters think about the combat is what's going to make it a lot more dynamic, a lot more entertaining, and a lot more rewarding as the characters figure out this weakness and manage to exploit it. That's always something that makes them really, really excited, and as a DM, I love getting my players excited. Another thing we should keep in mind when making these weaknesses are that they shouldn't be so debilitating that simply figuring them out makes the combat a complete cakewalk. So you want weaknesses that impair the creature in some way without making them completely useless. And notice that I say impair, because simply having vulnerabilities or something like you deal extra damage if this or that happens is not as fun as having weaknesses that can maybe incapacitate the creature or make them momentarily afraid or make them lose their reactions, make them halve their move speed. There are a lot of different examples you can use to make weaknesses that the characters can exploit that doesn't just deal extra damage and that is not something that completely ruins the creature. Now, it's not a complete requirement, but I also think that these weaknesses should be something that is thematically fitting for the creature, and that is probably the most difficult thing, because you need to read the monster's description in the monster manual or what you know about it and try to think what would make this creature react in a less than fortunate way, or what is a physiological attribute of the creature that could maybe be exploited, such as the ankek having a soft underbelly, so if it's prone you have advantage on attacks against it. Another thing that I like to do is to also think about how difficult it would be for the characters to figure out this weakness. So if you have characters in the party that are proficient in history, arcana, nature, stuff like that, you can allow them to either just know the weakness as combat starts. You can tell them you know this and that about wolves. You know that they're probably afraid of fire or that they fight less effectively if they're on their own. And that would make a character with proficiency in nature able to tell the other party members about what they know about wolves, so the characters can exploit the weakness. You can also let the characters simply roll at the start of combat, set a DC 10, 13, 15, something relatively easy, but also something that makes it a bit challenging to figure out what is this particular type of monster's weakness. This has the added benefit of making these skills, history, nature, arcana, stuff like that, actually usable and have a mechanical benefit for the characters, because if they can figure out these weaknesses before the combat even starts or right as the combat starts, they'll have a lot easier go at it, and that's something that will really reward characters that made that choice of investing in these knowledge skills. So to summarize, try to create weaknesses for your monsters that are exploitable, that are dynamic, that changes how the combat works, how the creature acts or debilitates them in some way, instead of just meaning that they take more damage, and try to make sure that the characters can actually exploit these weaknesses, make them so they appeal or they fit with the character's abilities, and also give the characters an opportunity to discover the weaknesses through the various proficiencies in knowledge skills. And if you're looking for more monsters with weaknesses and a whole lot more dynamic content for 5e, including adventures, magic items, merchant NPCs that can craft new magic items, enhance the character's magic items, or give them unstable spell marks that give them new magical abilities, and new puzzles and traps, and a whole lot more, I would implore you to check out Milando's Guide to Magical Marvels. We'd really love to have your support. The more pledges we can get, the more money we can raise, the more awesome art and content we can put in the book. So yeah, if you're looking for some cool content for 5e, please check out Milando's Guide to Magical Marvels. There will be a link in the description below, and we would love to have your support. Beyond that, there's not a whole lot left to say, except thank you for watching, and I hope that I'll see you in the next video.